This is a Momentum Media production.
Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show, the podcast by investors for investors.
Well, g'day everyone. It's Liam Garman, Managing Editor of Real Estate at Momentum Media, the team that brings you the Smart Property Investment Show. And today I'm joined by Simon Buckingham and Brendan Kelly, the team from Results Mentoring. Gentlemen, welcome to the podcast. It's not your first rodeo, so welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thanks. It's great to be here again.
Now, look, for our listeners who might be joining us for the first time or who are just really beginning to navigate their property investment journey, give us a little bit of a snapshot of Results Mentoring, what you do, who you help in your day-to-day.
Simon, that'd be you.
Sure, I was waiting for you to go, Brendan. Anyway, that's why I was meant to let it out.
I thought with podcasts, you got to elbow the other guy out, get your answer in first.
That's right.
Oh, that'll probably happen down the track a bit.
No worries. So for us, the exciting thing about what we do with Results Mentoring, having come up the ranks as property investors ourselves over the years and spent more than a couple of decades investing in property and different strategies ourselves, is that we get to share that experience with others. And along with our team of highly experienced property investing mentors, we're able to teach and train people in all forms of property investment to help them achieve whatever goals they want to achieve out of their property. And over the years, aside from buying and selling dozens of properties ourselves, we've personally mentored, each of us, hundreds of property investors over the past 2 decades. And that includes many that have achieved financial independence through property with our support. And I think, Brendan, one of the most exciting things for us is when we get that call or that email from one of our members saying, you know what, I've just quit my job, or I've just made that 6-figure, or in some cases even a 7-figure profit from their property investing. And to be able to be part of that journey and support people along that and see the transformation that they achieve in their lives as a result of that and being able to support that is just awesome. And it gives us a lot of passion, I think, for what we do.
Yeah, great. Absolutely. Seconded. There is a joy seeing the spark in the eyes of the people that we're able to support and knowing that we've changed lives. And we can go to our graves proud of the contribution we've made, that we're elevating the property investing industry, and those particularly generically as well as those we engage or who engage in our service directly. It's a really brilliant way to live a life, and we stand proud on it.
Simon, you mentioned before an email from your members when they get that 6-figure, maybe 7-figure profit. How does the service work? Is it a membership-based service that you offer?
Yes, it is. So Brendan and I do a number of things. So we'll often speak and educate publicly, for example, like on today's podcast, because, you know, we love to see people succeed and we want to try and share knowledge as best we can and share the benefits of our own experience and the experience of our members. We do also run a personalized mentoring program for people who are really looking to take their property investing up to the next level, who are looking to achieve great things through property or even transform their lives, create a financial independence for themselves, or a more comfortable, more secure retirement, whatever that might look like. We work with people on a 12 or more month basis. And we have people who've been with us in our mentoring program for nearly 2 decades now, who came to us right back at the beginning and have continued in the community, which is just fantastic. But we do that. We work quite intimately with a select group of people over a 12-month period and understand what they're trying to achieve through their own property investing, and what are the goals they're trying to achieve, what do they need to learn to be able to achieve that. And then we're there with them every step of the way as they're analysing areas, looking at potential opportunities, securing those opportunities, whether that's a more passive investing approach that's more about, say, getting the best market-driven growth or positive cash flow out of their property deals, or whether it's more active, this type of strategy like renovating properties for profit or developing properties for profit or doing commercial property. We support them in whichever strategies make the most sense for them, for what they're trying to achieve. And we have a lot of fun. It's a brilliant community of like-minded investors who are all at different points on their own journey and all with slightly different goals, but all very positive, all focused on building wealth for themselves, their families, for their legacy. And it's just a great thing to be a part of.
And you both mentioned it before, that it goes to the crux of what this program is, what this podcast is. It's about teaching and informing investors on how to build their strategies so they're not just acquiring for acquiring's sake. Brendan, on the flip side of this, if you don't use professionals like yourselves, or if you don't come in with a long-term strategy in mind, Brendan, what are some risks if your acquisition strategy is buying for the sake of buying?
It's interesting. Great question. We get a lot of people who come to us and say, hey, I'm a property investor. I want to do it better. We go, so cool. So tell me how you got started and what was the ambition and desire? And they go, well, I got started because I thought it'd be a good idea at the time, or my mate said he'd had it and I didn't want to miss out, or, just a whole pile of random selection of thoughts that got together and said, why don't we buy something? And the approach is typically ready, fire, aim. It is, I think I'll become a property investor. If I go to realestate.com.au, I'm sure I'll find something that looks like a good something to buy it, and then go, well, what do I do with it now? Ready, fire, aim. And we spend a significant amount of time in conversation with people to say, yeah, no, that's not the approach. It needs to be ready, aim, fire. And the aim part is the most critical component to a successful purchase. It is why are you investing? What is it that you want to get from your investing journey? And then more specifically, what do you want to get out of this property? And how does this property help you on your investing journey and what it is you want to achieve? And what is the outcome that you're going to get from this property? And by when do you anticipate getting that? And based on the contribution that makes to what you're looking to achieve, how many more do you need and what else do you need to do? If you take into consideration then your skills, the money you've got available, the cash borrowing, and you start to create a picture of how this all plays together, then you've got some sort of basis on which to make a really solid investing decision.
I think a great question to ask yourself as an investor, for anyone who's already got property, is you want to ask yourself, when you bought that property, did you know how much in dollar terms you need that property to make for you, and by when, in order to fit in with your financial goals? And I think Brendan makes a very, very good point that most people have just kind of fallen into their investing.
Yeah.
Now, maybe the accountant said, oh, you're paying too much tax, go get a lead property, reduce your tax bill. As opposed to thinking, where do I actually want to be and when financially, and how will investing in any particular property or using any particular property investing strategy actually help me achieve that in the shortest possible timeframe with the least amount of risk? People shy away from using professionals or paying for education because there's a certain mindset around not wanting to spend money unnecessarily, which I understand. But there's a great saying that if you think education's expensive, try ignorance. And that the cost of one avoidable mistake will eclipse the cost of any education that you might have undertaken that could have prevented that mistake being made in the first place.
So going back to your question, Liam, the model here is what do you think could happen that might not work so well for people if they don't get some support? They end up in a mess and they don't achieve anything remotely close to what they envisage or dream that they want to achieve when they first get started. Most people, as you know, and there is common knowledge for those in the industry, most people only ever buy and whole property investment because they can't get beyond it because they don't know how or there's issues around it. And to that end, then
the one.
Yeah, well, stopping at one's not going to be the solution for you. One will make a contribution, no doubt, and as a long-term buy and hold, there's every chance it will make a reasonable contribution to the life you want to live. But it won't be the solution, the sole solution for the outcome that you want at the end of the journey that you think you'll be taking in property. So doing it blindly with a ready, fire, aim approach has a consequence to it that is lifelong. And really needs to be considered. So the more support that you can get from people around you, the more support you can get from those who have done it before, those who are there to support you to do you better, the more support you can invest into your own journey, the more likely you are to get the outcome that you want from it.
And that is creating that long-term strategy, not viewing it as a get-rich-quick scheme. I mean, there are plenty of places in Australia where At worst, you're going backwards in property values. At best, in a lot of areas around Australia, you could get better returns by, and I was actually analysing the data on a recent podcast that I did, you could get better returns by randomly selecting ASX 200 stocks, putting them on a dartboard, doing the whole, what's the old adage in stock selecting? You're probably going to outperform if you cover up your eyes and throw a dart at a dartboard and invest where it lands. But that's why you need that long-term strategy, and that's why you need to partner with informed investors such as yourself.
Well, see, I'm going to challenge you. Mate, I love you dearly, but I'm going to challenge you. It doesn't have to be a long-term strategy, and that's what we're all about. Yeah,
nice.
You don't have to invest. See, what you're saying from the long-term strategy, I get it, but you flip that around. If you're 50 years old and recognizing you need to start now, what long-term strategy are you talking about? Yeah, it doesn't work. And if you're hungry to get out and live a life that goes well beyond the 9 to 5 that you're living now, and you're talking long-term strategy, people are going to go, yeah, that's not for me. I want out and I want out fast. Give me something else. It doesn't have to be long-term. You apply some smarts to it. You have some wisdom and some education training, the support behind you to it. You can do it in 5 years. Yeah, you can do it in 10 fairly comfortably if you've got some smarts and some people and support behind you. But so you don't have to go for a 30-year model. That's though most people trip up and fall into the 30-year model. Yeah, they go for the simplistic, don't know what I'm doing, don't want to spend the money, don't want to learn about it other than what I can read out of books and podcasts. You know what? I don't necessarily want to throw big dollars at my education to do this really well. I just want to bumble my way through because time is on my side. I'm 9 foot tall and bulletproof, 20 years old, 25, 28 years old. You know what? What the hell if I make a mistake? But the thinking doesn't shift over the decades, and then they go, surprise, you're coming to the end and you're not there yet. And then we have to shift the journey a bit.
I think that's where the point here is you need to be very intentional with your investing. You need to understand what it is financially you want to get out of it, be that financial independence or just a more comfortable retirement or a certain lump sum to go spend on a big house or a holiday or whatever it might be. But be intentional, know what it is that you're investing for, and then tailor the strategies that you apply to best achieve that within the time frame that you're setting for yourself. So yeah, you're right. Property investing isn't get rich quick, but there are smarter and intelligent ways to invest in an intentional way that can certainly get you to your end goals faster. We don't like to talk about get rich quick, Brennan, do we? But we talk about build wealth fast.
Yeah, did you like that?
At least build wealth faster than you otherwise do so.
Yeah. Now, I think a lot of people, that was a good hook for a lot of people. They do have the opportunity to learn more from the both of you. Today, you're happy to make a few announcements with some offers that you have on the table for our listeners?
Yeah, look, we've got a special gift that we'd love to share with everybody to help people get accelerated on their journey towards financial independence. And we can do that in a couple of days. A couple of ways. So one of the things that Brendan and I also do outside of the mentoring, we own a property analysis and research company called Property Predictions, which has some very sort of leading edge forecasting capabilities. And the approach that it uses has been proven to be very accurate in forecasting market direction, right down at the individual suburb level. So to give people a little bit of a leg up, one thing that we'd love to give to listeners today is our brand new free report on that's got a selection of Australia's next hot boom suburbs. So it features 10 or 11 of our latest predictions. And you can get a copy of that free of charge just by going to resultsmentoring.com/boom. Drop your details in there and we will email you a link to download that report. And you can go through that and it might give you a bit of a short list of places you might choose to investigate. And it's right up to the minute. These are some of the latest data that's being used to do these forecasts. And we've got selection right across the country. So wherever you are in the country, there's going to be something in the report that's maybe not too far from home. And when you register for that, if you'd like to have a chat with us or one of our team, you'll also have the opportunity to have a free strategy consult with one of the leading property investing mentors from our award-winning results mentoring program. And you could use that to, if you've got an existing portfolio, go through with us some of the data on that portfolio and identify whether the suburbs where you're currently holding properties are more likely to rise or fall over the coming months. And we can draw on some of that property predictions analysis to help you understand that, identify, does it make sense to hang on to these properties? Are they looking good for growth? Or could there be some thinking that needs to be done about corrective action potentially as well? You can get our expert analysis on your existing portfolio. We'll see how it's performing and does it actually marry up with the financial goals that you've got, or might there be some intelligent changes, some improvements to make? And what sort of strategies you might even use to grow your portfolio, get beyond where you are if you are striving to achieve something like financial independence or a significant step change in your wealth. What might make sense in your circumstances in terms of strategies to pursue, and perhaps we can give you a few pointers from our experience on how to best proceed with that. So if you want to tap into that, just go to resultsmentoring.com/boom, register for that free report, and then it'll also provide you with the opportunity to register for that free consult if you'd like to do that as well.
Make sure you jump online at resultsmentoring.com/boom to get hot market intelligence straight to your hands around Australia's 11 up-and-coming suburbs, places that you should be looking at, places that you should be researching, and also to have the opportunity to have a free strategy consult. You don't have to do this alone. You've got experts that will handhold you across the process to make sure that you are making the smart decisions. We're going to go to a quick break, and when we're back, we're going to be unpacking some of those strategies that Simon and Brendan were talking about earlier in the podcast, and strategies that you need in your back pocket in your property investment journey. We'll be back in just a second. Liam Garman here, Simon Buckingham and Brendan Kelly, the team from Results Mentoring. Gentlemen, earlier in the podcast, we were talking about financial independence as a goal for property investment. Talk us through, how do you define financial independence?
It can mean something a little bit different to different people, but I would really bring it down to one word, and that's choice. It's the ability to choose what work you'll do or how you'll spend your time, or whether you even work at all. For some people, it might be about not being dependent on superannuation in retirement, not having to rely on the government to fund your retirement. For other people, it might be about, I want to escape the rat race. I want to get out of my corporate job, and I want to get out of it yesterday. And for other people, it might be about not just their own financial independence, but leaving a legacy for their kids, for their children, so that their children have more choice down the track. So, but it comes back to that idea of, I can choose how I spend my time, whether to work at all, what sort of work I do, without feeling like I am relying on an employer to provide me with the income, to generate the income that I need to survive. And it's been really exciting, I guess, in our own experiences, exiting the corporate world and being able to focus on property and focus on supporting others. But we see this in our program as well, people who are looking to move away from that reliance on a job income, and they get into property, and they've found the way through property to become financially independent. There's, I guess, a lot of people associate the concept of financial independence or financial freedom with the idea of having a passive income, don't they, Brendan?
I do.
But they don't really appreciate what that necessarily looks like and what they might need to do in their property investing to achieve that. One of the big epiphanies for me, I was one of those people who was in the rat race and in a corporate job that I frankly hated, doing long hours and often working away on weekends and so on with high stress deadlines. And what got me into property was the desire, the drive to get out of that environment and to find an alternative. And the big wake up for me was the realization that if you want to be financially independent or financially free, you need to have a source of income from something other than your job that can cover your living expenses. The moment you have that, the moment you have income from something other than your job, whether that's investments, business interests, whatever it might be, but something that's not your job, the moment you have
something you're not exchanging time for money.
Exactly. The moment you have that ability to generate that income from something other than your job, and you've got enough of that income that covers your living experiences, you're financially free, you're financially independent.
Hmm.
And then you've got that choice. Do I work? I mean, if you love your job, more power to you. And I think it's great if you can get paid to do something you're passionate about. But, do you want the choice as to whether you work or not and for how long you work? And that's really what we're talking about here when we talk about financial independence or financial freedom. It's having enough income from your investments or other income generating assets, businesses, whatever they might be, that exceed your living expenses. Now, ultimately, you might want that to be completely passive income in that, as Brendan said, you're not exchanging any real time to generate that money. And in order to do that, there's a little hidden equation that tells you how much you might need to create from your property investing in this case or other investing in order to be able to live that life, to have the passive income that you desire. So if you have a sense in terms of how much passive income you might want, and let's say for the sake of argument, Brandon, $100,000. Like a lot of people would be perfectly happy with a passive income of $100,000, wouldn't they?
We do. It is interesting. For the last decade, we say, how much would be nice for you? And almost everybody just says, 100,000 a year would be lovely. Thanks. So go with that.
Yeah, I might have to index that for cost of living at some point. But yeah, it seems
might be 150 soon.
Yeah, but so whatever that is for you, if you know that that's the income from non-job sources that you would want coming in, that's sufficient enough to cover your living expenses, then the question is, well, how much do I need to have done in my investing? What do I actually need to generate that income? And there's a basic equation that you can use to determine how big a pot or a pool of assets you needed to have created in order to generate that income, isn't there, Brendan?
There is. So if I can take over here for a second, basically it's whatever you want to earn passively. Divide that by the return that you think you can achieve, and that will give you the value of the asset base you need to play with, or accumulate. So if you think you're really good with your investing activity, you could get really good returns on your investing activity. And let's say I want $100,000 a year, and you go, you know what? I'm so good. I think I can get a 10% net yield on whatever my assets are, whether I'm renting out tools, whether I'm renting out houses or apartments, whether I'm getting a return on shares, whether I'm getting a return on business investment, whether I'm getting a return on other people's investments. Whatever my money is doing for me in whatever shape or form it is, if I can get 10%, then I only need $1 million. $1 million, yeah? $1 million is not as big as it used to sound. In the 70s, when you talk $1 million, people would go, what the? I don't think numbers exist that big. Yeah. But today, $1 million is, yeah, sure. It's a common number. So if I've got $100,000 a year as my target, 10% is my estimated return that I can get, or average return I can get net. You go, you know what? I'm going to need $100,000 divided by 10% equals $1 million of income producing assets. The end. Now, how many people can get 10%? Yeah, not a lot. Yeah, 10% is quite a dramatic return. If you look at, though, what people say, I'm going to hold property for 30 years and I'm going to get a great yield from it, and I'll buy in the city somewhere, then your yields are looking in the order of 2, 3, or 4%.
Yeah.
So if we go for, say, 3% as a return, if you go for, and I have to get my trusty calculator out, but if you go for $100,000, divide that by 3%, you're talking a significant volume of asset base that you're going to need to accumulate.
$3.333 million.
Right. You need $3.33 million. Yeah. Now that's, in common terms in today's language, that's like, that's a leap. That's $3 million over and above my own home in net income producing assets is not a common number. So people are going, okay, well then maybe property by way of residential property, albeit debt-free, valued at $3 million. Yeah, if I have to go and buy that now, that's going to be a little bit of time to pay that off. So there's a whole game that needs to be played. So then you need to start to think about, and this then starts to speak about the skills that you will need. One of the skills you need is to get a great yield. You've got to figure out what a good yield is and how and what properties will deliver that, and then how you accumulate that, how you pay it. Then you've got to get into, well, how do I accumulate the asset base? So what's the way? And based on the time that I've got to play. If I'm 50, I've got a limited time. If I'm 30, I've got significantly more time. And then we start, do you see how it starts to play out? So then we go into, all right, based on the level of urgency I need relative to the time scale I've got, how hard do I need to go? What do I need to learn? And then we go, okay, and you start to get a picture then around what you need to do yourself, which leads the path then, or the decision, can I do this slowly and more easily over time, or do I need to be more aggressive? And that leads to the choice then around, and Simon said, and the path you could choose, the choice then around, I can be more passive in my investing activity, or do I need to be more active in my investing activity? So the equation is the base. This amount of income divided by the amount of return on investment that I believe I can get will give me my asset base. When you wrap time around that, you start to get a picture around how hard you need to go. And as Simon said, if you're someone who wants to get out real fast, you've got limited time, you need to go harder and be more active in your investing strategy. If you're a more maturing person, in fact, again, you may need to concentrate your effort and be a little more active in your investing activity. If you're 20-something and you go 9 foot tall and bulletproof, I got time, I got a life to live and a couple of kids to pop out, then you got a whole different scenario where you can do this more passively over time.
Assuming you're okay to stay in your job for the meantime. But if you're not, if you want to get out of your job earlier, and we've certainly had people through the program in their 20s looking to exit the rat race before they were 30 and actually achieving that. They need to, again, be more active, more aggressive in the approach that they take. And you can be. We know from personal experience and experience of our members that you can do this stuff in a short space of time. For me personally, the decision when I finally made it and the decision to take action, because none of this is going to happen if you don't actually take action. The decision to take action to the point where I was actually able to walk out of my corporate job and never look back was a space of about 3.5 years. And, over that period of time, did things that most people, frankly, don't do with their investing because they don't know any different to the traditional approach, and ended up buying something like 35 properties in that space of time. And people go, you can't do that. It's not possible. Of course it's possible. It's about understanding or knowing what you don't know and then learning how to do it. So, but is it the traditional typical approach? No, it isn't. And Brendan, maybe it's worth exploring that. Why is it that most people only end up with that 1, 2, or 3 properties? Why do they find it hard to achieve financial independence through the traditional buy and hold for the long-term property investing strategy, do you think?
Yeah, it's a simple mathematic equation or series of them. If you are on a certain income, we could get into detail here, but probably better to keep it at a high level. If you're on let's say you're on $100,000 a year, that means you've got 30% that you can put towards servicing debt, which represents $30,000. If you've got $30,000 you can put towards servicing debt, you want to buy your own home, great, you buy your own home, that sucks up the entire servicing capacity. You can't do anything until either you get a better paying job or you get enough. You have to have a better paying job because you hit your limit in borrowing capacity. So you get a better paying job. All right, great. So 10 years later, I'm earning more. That's wonderful. Then you go into, I want to buy an investment property. You still got debt on your own home. Your own home is worth more. You can increase the loan on your own home, which is wonderful because that will release cash. But increasing the debt on your own home means you have a higher servicing requirement, which sucks out more of your income. So, okay, great. I'm lifting my income again. I've got more income. I'm lifting my debt, which means more of my income needs to go towards servicing debt. Okay, good. I think I'll buy I buy a property, which I'm going to call my first investment property. And you've got to come up with the deposit. Great. You can draw down on your own home for that. Increase debt, but draw down on your own home for that. But you've got to service the debt on that. So then you got another loan. Well, you got rent coming in, but not all of only 75% of the rent goes towards servicing debt, according to the banks. So then you've got a limit. You're going to have to put more money in. And that limits, that sucks up the rest of your borrowing capacity relative to your income. So you then have to get a better job again, get more promotions, grow in your capacity again before you can draw down more, increase debt further to release capital to then get a smaller amount of borrowing capacity to go and buy again if you want to. By that stage, you're popping out a couple of kids. Life's intense for 20 years and the cash is drained. You're in a scenario. Since suddenly you're 50. So, or even 60 before the kids are free, depending upon when you pop them out. And so you've got a whole life cycle here of there is just a world of pressure that stops you from doing passively your own money, buy and hold, never sell, such that you're pushing the accumulation down the path a bit. Some cleverness will support that, and there are ways to do that. But the vast majority of people don't get past that. And again, they also want to self-educate. So there's a whole process with it.
Yeah, so, I think there's a couple of other things on that as well. One is the approach you described, Brendan, of constantly drawing down against existing equity, increasing your debt levels, borrowing more, buying the traditional property, which more likely than not is going to be a negatively geared property. That burden or that requirement on you to support the debt through your own income on an ongoing basis is just tying you back to your job. So if you had a financial independence objective, then unless that financial independence objective is 30 years down the track, you're actually working against yourself. You're working against financial independence because you're creating a scenario through the strategy you're employing that's tying you to your job. Yeah.
Now, Simon,
people advocate this approach, though, from the perspective of, I'm going to buy a property, it'll go up in value, I'll draw against it, I'll buy the next one, I'll keep buying as many as I can, I get to retirement, I'll sell down half, pay out the other half, and that will give me my passive income. Which sounds great in theory, but we could probably count on one hand the number of people we know, Brendan, who've actually done that, because it tends not to work in practice, because more often than not, as you pointed out, Brendan, you keep hitting this wall that you simply can't get the next property because you're at a borrowing limit because of the way you're investing. And so you might never achieve the critical mass that you need to get that outcome.
Now, Simon, you and I have flapped our gums for ages, and Liam's tried very, very hard to get in from time to time.
Too kind,
Liam,
Brendan.
Space is yours. You go.
No, I'm genuinely excited about this, and I think a lot of our listeners will be extremely excited as well. We're going to go to a quick break. We'll be back in just a second. Liam Garman here, Simon Buckingham and Brendan Kelly, the team from Results Mentoring. We've unpacked the passive strategies. Can you talk us through the active strategies that you briefly touched on earlier in the podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this is the one of the questions for those who are seeking to escape the rat race in the shortest possible time as well. But anyone who's looking for that passive income is really, how passive does the income have to be? Does it actually have to be a passive income that's, say, just coming in from rents? Or could it be what we would refer to as an actively generated income, basically turning your property investing into a business type activity where it is throwing off profits, cash profits, with sufficient regularity and in a sufficient amount that it actually replaces your income and gets you out of your job faster. And that can be one of the most effective ways to use property to achieve financial independence in a shorter time frame. It doesn't mean that you don't migrate to a more passive income over time, but in the shorter term, you focus on more active, what we would call value-adding strategies to more rapidly create cash profits or additional equity within months rather than years or decades. And so this is using strategies like renovating a property to lift its value quickly, or subdividing a property, subdividing off a backyard and selling that off in order to create a cash profit, or redeveloping a property into 2 or more dwellings in order to create a profit in a matter of months rather than a decade.
The key criteria here is the requirement to sell, which is not something we've talked about yet. There is a requirement to sell and move on and duplicate.
Yeah, and that's heresy, isn't it?
Many people, that's a tough pill to swallow. They go, no, you never sell. You never sell a property. And you go, okay, great. And therefore, you've pushed yourself back into the passive model of just make sure that you've got enough income to be able to service the debt, et cetera, which goes down the 30-year path. Again, it comes back to time and how fast you want to be out of your current employment.
Yep. And it doesn't mean that you're not trying to build that asset base that we talked about. So, whether it's, $1 million that you're going to invest at 10% return, 2 million at 5%, or 3.3 million at 3% in order to generate your passive income, where is that capital base going to come from? And so this more active approach is a way of building that capital base faster than you might achieve if you just rely on longer-term market-driven growth. So if I can add value to a property, sell it, yes, I'll have to pay tax, but that's the cost of doing business. That's the result of making a profit. So if we're in the business of making money as investors, is that not actually a good thing? That we then take that profit and our original capital, combine the two, we've got more to work with. We're building that asset base. Go again, recycle it, make another profit, build the asset base, and get it moving up towards that $1, $2, $3.3 million, whatever it needs to be, in a shorter time frame. And then when you've achieved that, you could start to reallocate the investing back into more passive income generating assets, so that you're not relying on the actively generated income, you're moving towards the passive model. So, we've got people that we've worked with over the years who were able to take this active investing approach and get out of their job in 3 or 5 years and completely migrate to a property business model, if you like, turning over valuating property deals, which completely replaced their job and more, but required a fraction of the hours that they'd otherwise spend in their job. So some of the guys we're still working with them today who achieved this, they spend half the year on holidays.
Do you have any tangible examples, any case studies that you could share with the listeners?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a really good point, because otherwise it's all just theory. So if we look at what some people have done in the program, so for instance, one of the guys that you're still mentoring, Brendan, Adam, took him 5.5 years. What was his journey just, over that 5.5 years to get to that point?
So he'd done a reno, buy, reno, sell, made a little money, was happy, did it randomly, did it shooting from the hip, was fortunate in his outcome, because many people who just start with a reno approach don't end up with a profit. But he did. And then he recognized he needed a system. He wanted, and he asked, do you have a system? Do you have an ability that I can test and measure so that I know that I'm walking in with greater security of a profit than just sort of some random dartboard approach and a hope and a prayer? We go, well, yeah, we do. And we taught him that. And his next one made 73,000. He was pretty happy with that. We said, okay, great. On the completion of that, I said, all right, now what? Do you want to do another reno? He goes, no, I want more. What do you mean more? I want to do more, bigger. So he took on a renovate subdivide, so what we're doing is we're developing a skill, and then we're adding to that depth of skill, and we're getting into then higher priced properties, such that ultimately you can get into multiple properties simultaneously, and then you're really able to amplify your ability. But you're doing it one safe step at a time. Build skill, cosmetic reno. Do a reno and a subdivision. Well, I've done renos. I've got a clue on that, but I haven't done subdivision before. Let's build skill on subdivision. Then the next one might be a reno, subdivide, build on the back, which is, again, what Adam did. And he built reno, subdivide, build 2. Did another one simultaneously, reno, subdivide, build 2. And that was enough for him to go, I'm making more money out of my property investing activity than out of my full-time job in less than a third of the time. You know what? I'm out. I'm done. And he quit. Right now, and over a period of, this has been 15 years, 14 actually. Right now, he is running 17 simultaneous projects with asset values in excess of $50 million, with a profit coming his way in the order of $10 million to be completed over the next 24 months. Now, you could do a lot with $10 million.
I can think of one or two things.
Yeah. And when you're talking about, well, where does that leave me? Where does that leave me from the perspective of, I want to sip pina coladas on the beach for the rest of my life, living off a passive income where I don't do anything? Great. Convert that profited capital into income-producing assets, and probably through commercial purchases, income-producing assets, and then bang, I've got pina coladas.
That's where you can jump from the active strategy into a passive strategy, if
absolutely correct, because you're after the income now rather than the generation of asset. Now, this guy's, my memory serves, I think he just turned 40. So
that's insulting. Goodness.
So not possible. Absolutely possible. Yeah, it's an extraordinary life to be living.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that often drives people down this path is a sense of job insecurity, isn't it? I don't think anyone's job is really safe these days, and so the idea of just relying on that career path and promotions is probably one of the riskiest financial strategies you can adopt. So having something else, your property investing to bolster that or provide an alternative to that can be a great risk mitigating strategy. So we had one of our guys, Grant, was actually made redundant in 2020, and he worked with one of our other mentors, Tony, on a plan to not have to go back to work, having been made redundant. And so rather than going back to work, he created a property business that was all about renovating and selling, or effectively flipping houses, buy a house, renovate it, sell it on. Used that to build enough income coming in actively that he didn't feel like he needed to go back to a job. And he was able to become financially independent in just 2.5 years using that strategy. You know, it's kind of deals he does now. He's just completed one recently that had $135,000 profit in a handful of months. So that's more than most people earn in a year. He did that part-time in a handful of months alongside other projects that he's got going on. So you can create that active business. And, you know, if you have a passion for that as well, you might choose to stay just doing that rather than necessarily migrate it over to passive. But you can certainly do exactly what we were just talking about, where you reach a point where you start to push the money into passive income. And a great example, very recently in our program, that we've got a couple of South Australian members, Steve and Mandy, who had built experience in property over a number of years, over several deals. They'd gotten to things like subdividing properties and selling off the blocks of land as a way of creating those actively generated profits. Just last year, they completed a 13-lot land subdivision that in that one deal alone made them a profit of over $1.2 million from a single deal. Now, that's transformative just from a single property deal. And I don't know any other investing strategy where you can make that sort of a lump sum profit that could in and of itself just change your life. And, you know, if you went and, as Brendan suggested before, if you went and reinvested that at, say, 10%, you'd have a pretty reasonable income. But can you? And people go, you know, you can't expect to get yields that high. Well, Steve and Mandy are a case in point proving the fact that if you know what you're doing, you can. Yeah. Off the back of that deal, they took not all of those proceeds. They took some of those proceeds and reinvested them into industrial properties. And by working the deal, knowing what they were doing around how to work that deal, they had ultimately created a passive income stream off that industrial property that delivers a net positive cash flow of over $80,000 per annum. And that's a net return of over 8% on the purchase price of that property that they bought a few months ago. So yes, in today's market, yes, with the right knowledge and the ability to see the opportunities and then work those opportunities, you can create some pretty high net returns. And that's net of outgoings because the tenants pay the outgoings that, you know, they don't have debt on that property. So it's pure net, over 8% return, 8.6%, I think, ultimately.
So if you think about that, so I'm cutting you off, sorry, apologies, Simon. If you think about that, the average income in this country is $99,000 a year, apparently. Now, let's call it 100. Happy to round that up. Let's call $100,000 as the average income. At more than $80,000 a year, passive income from one purchase, it's $1 million invested, one purchase, $80,000 a year. You bought yourself 4 days a week back out of your 5-day-a-week job. And you can sit on the beach for 4 days a week and then roll up on Friday and do what you have to do. And then go back to the beach on Saturday. I mean, that's not a bad existence.
Yeah. And in fact, you know, in this particular instance, that's $80,000 of net positive cash flow has fully replaced Mandy's income. Yeah. So, you know, is she lying on the beach? No, she isn't. Steve and Mandy have got their next subdivision deal
dry after
underway. So that, you know, they don't feel a need to stop anytime soon. But not having to rely on their previous sources of income is obviously massively transformative for the choices they have, coming back to that whole point about, at the end of the day, it's all about choice. So what we've learned from our own investing in these sort of examples is that there's almost like a bit of a formula with the active investing side of things as well. So we talked about with the passive investing, you need an asset base invested at a certain net return to get a certain passive income. If you want to do active investing as a way of replacing your job, there's a different formula to that. So what we've seen is that, if you can build up the equivalent of about 2 years of your regular income as savings, as a safety net. So you don't want to just quit your job and try and do this stuff full time with no experience. You want to build up that safety net, say about 2 years of your income. Seems about right. You want to have some working capital that you can actually be putting into deals that's not part of that safety net. So in terms of, the sort of values you deal with today, we'd suggest at least a couple of $100,000 in investment capital is probably not a bad amount to be working with. But you also want to have a degree of confidence in your ability to deliver on this before you go cold turkey on your job.
Yeah.
So from what we've experienced and what our members have experienced over the years, around about 4 successfully completed property projects is about right to get that level of comfort and confidence that you actually know what you're doing. And then people go, but how do you get loans if you don't have a job? Well, Adam, case in point, he's got $50 million worth of assets in projects at the moment. Does he have a job? Nope. Not your typical PAYG job, that's for sure. So how does he get borrowing? Well, this is where you learn how to work with others. You might line up investing partners to help finance future projects. And then as you do get your track record yourself, you establish a property business that can support borrowing as well. Understanding different lending options can give you choice here as well. It's about being more sophisticated, but it's all doable. So a couple of years income saved, say $200K in investment capital, get 4 projects under your belt, build those relationships with potential investing partners, and you could be good to go with your own active property investing business that's effectively replaced your job. And we've seen that multiple times throughout the course of us doing this in the program over the last couple of decades.
Now, I'm going to guess there's a lot of listeners that are very excited to potentially reach out and partner with yourselves to use some of your insights, use some of your intelligence in this market to expand their own portfolios, whichever strategy they choose. Or like you mentioned before, jumping from an active to a passive strategy, whatever meets their lifestyle at the moment. Of course, they've got their free gifts, their free report at resultsmentoring.com/boom to find out those 11 hot boom suburbs from Simon and Brendan, your intelligence and your data that you've pulled together, and also their free strategy consult. For people who are interested in reaching out and potentially learning more, how can they get in touch? Of course, they can get their free report, but how can they reach out to the both of you?
Yeah, so one of the best ways to do this is probably through that free strategy consult as well. So grab the report, but register for the free strategy consult, and that gives us and our team an opportunity to have a chat with you one-on-one. See where you're really at and what you're trying to achieve. And by all means, more than happy to talk about what we do in the program as part of that as well. Or you could simply head to resultsmentoring.com and you can get in touch with us through that website as well. And more than happy to have a chat about what we do and whether that might help support you on your journey as well.
Fantastic. Gentlemen, I think that is all we have time for on the podcast today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Absolute pleasure.
Pleasure indeed, young man.
That was Simon Buckingham and Brendan Kelly, the team from Results Mentoring. We'll be back at the same time in just 2 days with another Smart Property Investment Show podcast. But until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.